How's it going, everybody? So we're back in the shop and we are modifying a radiator. It is a Northern radiator. They made it in Roseville, Minnesota. Really good radiator. One of my teammates, Oli, runs that same radiator. My philosophy is I would much rather not have to modify parts to put in the vehicle. The thought process behind that, if anything breaks, it's something that I can just buy and bring to the track with me. I don't have to spend a lot of time modifying it. And then put it on the trailer. So we're gonna go ahead and do what I just said to not do, and that's modify this radiator. Reason behind it is that there's really no getting around it for this type of setup. It's a really inexpensive radiator, so if I want to modify another one, it's gonna be really cheap for me to do, and I actually might end up doing that before I start competing with this car. So to start things off, this is a 3-inch core triple pass GM radiator from Northern. You can see the inlet and outlets are on opposite sides, and there's actually plates welded in the end tanks that divert the coolant so that it flows 3 times through the core. You have more fluid flowing through the heat transfer element, therefore more heat exchange is going to occur. It'll cool the fluid a lot more efficiently. That's the idea behind it. First thing we're gonna do is that because this is a rear mount radiator, this is gonna need some dash 16 bungs welded onto it so that we can use dash 16 braided line. The next thing as well is that I had to cut off the fill neck off the top of the radiator. You see that right there? And then we're gonna put a little hole on the top for a dash 4 or dash 3 line, so that we can actually bleed the system. That's where the air is gonna escape when we fill up this radiator through a swirl pot. So first things first, we're gonna go ahead and weld that on the top. A little overview of welding aluminum is that I prefer to use 2% lanthanated electrode. That would be the light blue electrodes, if you're wondering. That's what I use. 3/32 size is just the kind of standard that I use for the amperage that I'm outputting. A number 6 ceramic cup, very little stick out. All right, guys, so I got all of the modifications done to the radiator. I actually want to kind of make a quicker video than I have been, so I didn't show any of that. But like I said before, I use a Northern radiator. There's the part number right there. 209690. The things that were done to this radiator is I welded dash 16 AN fittings onto the inlet and outlet. The other thing I did to the radiator is I cut the fill neck off and I plated it off. There's a little hole right there so that we can weld a dash 4 fitting in there so that we can run our expansion tank. And then I also put on these awesome mounts. These came from a company called Bung King. The one thing I did past just welding the mounts on is I actually welded a separate plate to kind of distribute the weight. I didn't really like how skinny they were. I felt like even with rubber isolators, it could vibrate and crack the end tanks, and that would be very detrimental if I am across the country with a heavily modified radiator and I have an end tank crack. So I just did that for a precautionary method. So I run dash 16 with a Miser 55 gallon per minute water pump. It's the same setup that we run in Austin Mata's Pro 2 car. And I'll also be running the mechanical water pump off of the motor. Actually, the motor's sitting right there right now. Currently letting it drip dry. Just waiting to mate it up to the dog box and start making the mounts for that. That's for another time. All right, so the other part of those mounts is actually the rubber isolated part. You can see there's the rubber isolator in the middle, and then those tabs that come off are mild steel. All of these products, the aluminum bung, the rubber isolator, and the metal tab, I got from Bung King. The important part about this is the rubber isolation. That's gonna heavily decrease the vibration that this radiator actually sees. So it's going to increase the longevity of these welds and prevent any sort of issues that we're gonna have there. The general idea here that we're gonna do with mounting this is that I wanna make sure that the dash 16 fitting is gonna clear down there. Pretty simple. Grab a dash 16 fitting. I'm gonna be using a 90 degree. Screw it on there and make sure you can install the line without having to move the radiator. Once we have that set, it's basically our depth from that rear ledge right there to the edge of the radiator. Mine ended up being 4 inches. We put our mounts on, and then I will use some 3/16 rod and basically lay the radiator back how I want it to sit. I haven't decided what angle I want it to sit at. I have to close the hatch and tie that mount into that bar right there and repeat the process at the bottom. All right, so we got the lower radiator mounts in, and those ended up being perfect length from how they came from the manufacturer to set the radiator back so that we could get enough clearance to get that bung in. But up top here, because we had to lay the radiator back, I went ahead and used this 3/16, I believe it is, mild steel rod. And I use this sort of technique when I mount intercoolers, radiators, anything like this that has a floating mounting tab. I get some nice thick rod like this, and really there's no trick to this. All you do is you bend one end, and then you just kind of angle it and sit it up to where you think you're gonna need it, and then you go ahead and mark the second bend, which starts right at the beginning of that tab. You bend accordingly, and really all you need to do is just make sure that these two bends are just clocked correctly so that you can mirror it on the other side here. And that's really all you gotta do. There's no tricks to it. You just kinda have to play around with it, and you'll get good enough to where you can not really have to take measurements. You can just kinda eyeball it, tweak it. It's really cheap metal rod, so like if you mess up, go ahead and give it another shot so it looks better. But that's my way of mounting these radiators with a floating rubber isolated mounting tab. Make sure to keep that vibration down and keep it nice and sturdy in there. And just like that, we have our rear mount radiator mounted with rubber isolators. So definitely something that everyone is capable of with a little bit of creativity. You know, getting some decent mounting tabs that are already pre-fabbed sort of thing. You can really take these kind of things that you'd think would be a big undertaking and really break them down into steps. And I think this turned out great. So we're gonna move on to mounting the pedal box in the next video. That's definitely a challenge. I talked to a few professionals that have built 370Z chassis before. So let's see what we can do here in this old barn, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.